we're working on 30-year asset plans, or Louise's team is, and beyond. We have to look at the life cycle costs of that building as well. So we could be actually just creating complete nightmares in the future, Jane, and that's the big issue. And I think on the news, I think Anglia News keep going to Harlow to show you the office buildings. And to be honest, there's no look. There's a real balance, isn't there? Somebody would say, well, it's accommodation, it's a roof over somebody's head, but actually, are you really helping that person? I'm not convinced you are. There's no outside space. The communal areas are awful. Bang, it goes on and on and on with it. So it's not something that I would put across my capital panels table. If that's we've looked at the Anglia Square, the HMSO building at Anglia Square. We've looked at Thorpe. Yeah, no, we have. We looked at Thorpe Road.
Over the years,
actually, the Norwich Union buildings, 1 and 2 on St. Stephen's, we were the first people to look at those, to convert those into residential, but just couldn't get them to work, and I couldn't get the energy efficiency levels up on them to a point where it would be okay for asset management in the future as well. So,
I think one of our challenges as a sector is that we provide temporary accommodation and people get stuck there. So you think you're providing something that people might stay for 3-4 months. I mean, we've got a homelessness scheme in King's Lynn, where I think when St. James's Lodge, where in the ideal world, no one would stay there longer than about 3 months maximum. And I know that over the years, we've had people stuck there for 3 years. So there is something for us about being comfortable that we're placing people places they can make it a home. We don't give people homes, we give them properties that they can make a home. But if we give them somewhere that actually is incapable of being a home, then we shouldn't be doing it.
You shouldn't use it. No. That's interesting. Actually, it's. I agree. I mean, there's no point in spending money knowing that it's money badly spent. I quite agree. And the only thing is, I mean, what will happen to the high street and all the office blocks and everything? We're in a huge change. They predict what's going to happen in this country in the next 4 years. We're going to see such a huge change. And is it time now for us to perhaps look at perhaps more of the continent? We all know Paris, we all know Barcelona, where you've got all the lovely boutique shops, and then above them you've got all the flats and so on. Do you see it in the future that we could perhaps return to or go to that way of accommodation? Office blocks are going to become defunct.
I think that you've got a really good point there. I think I remember having a conversation with Mark Prisk when he was housing minister, and that's now 7 years ago, when even then, a long time before COVID, a long time before online shopping completely took over our lives, we were saying that the majority of market towns have too large a shopping area. The reality, if I'm honest, and I don't want to be rude about Dereham, but if we're completely honest, then if you look at the number of vacant shops in Dereham, there is an over provision, and if you could shrink that retail area, encourage cafes, but also provide a place for older people to live where they're accessible to shops, etc., etc. But I think over the last 5 months since COVID, I don't know how many white transits are driving around Norfolk, crisscrossing around each other, but the amount of online shopping and the very fact that we've seen 90 redundancies at Jarrell's, including their chief executive. We are at a moment of massive change in how we're living. I'm not sure we can guess exactly where we'll end up, but you're absolutely right. We've got an over provision of retail space, and we probably now, Broadland has been successfully working from home for 5 months. We will never go back into our offices in the way that we used to, and over a period we'll significantly reduce our cost of offices as a result, which means we'll have more money to invest in other things. Now, we're not going to be the only business that's saying actually from home seems to work, and therefore there is this moment in time to change what we're doing.
Yes, I think.
Shall I just finish that off? Yeah, and Michael's absolutely right. We're working with Kings Lynn Borough Council at the moment. My team are working with them and reviewing all the retail premises through Kings Lynn Borough Council's area at the moment, just to see if we can do precisely that, Jane. So that's very different from office buildings or high-rise office buildings. These are looking at low level. Can we put something on top of it, sort of stuff? But it is underway, and I think every local authority, I know Norwich is starting to look as well. So
I think
it will come.
Yes.
Yep.
I think there will be a huge change in the way we look at living and cities and what we do with our cities, and I hope for the better, to be honest. I think we all do. Fingers crossed.
Thanks, Jane. I've just got one comment from Daryl, and she said it would be really key for BHG to work in partnership with others, especially the third sector, who can apply for funds sometimes that housing associations or local authorities cannot. So I think that's probably a good observation, Daryl. Thank you. Is there any other questions before we close? Is there anything else, anybody? Michael, do you want to do some closing comments?
Oh, Michael's, well, I think it's been, I found it a really good session, so thank you very much indeed. It's good that we've had as much time discussing it as I spent yakking on earlier, which I think is always a positive sign. I hope you found it useful and interesting. It is our first members event of this type. So it's interesting because we weren't sure that it would work, but now it has. We can dream up some others, and hopefully we can also meet face to face. Broadham will stay committed. Daryl and I have had a little private chat on the chat function whilst you've all been talking, and agreed that Broadland and Pathways and YMCA need to be closer together and working out how we can better work together. And I think it all comes down, solutions will only come down through partnerships. And it's not just part with local government or with third sector or other housing associations, it's also partnerships with the private sector. And I think we need to get everybody committed to finding solutions. Because ultimately, as I've said this many times over the years, it could be any of our children or grandchildren in time. The reality is housing has become so unaffordable. We have people needing and wanting a housing association, a home, who 20 years ago, given their circumstances, would have been a first-time buyer. And until we resolve that issue, homelessness is not an issue that hits a certain group. It can hit anybody and any family and any individual. But thank you very much indeed for this evening. We will do some more of these. Now we know they sort of work. And we will share the slides if anybody wants them. And if anybody wants a copy of that board paper from 2 years ago, it's a bit out of date nowadays. Please ask Paula and we'll ensure that comes to you as well. And I think with that, I'm going to say good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, everybody.
Bye-bye. 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 Bye-bye.